This tale bears the weighty title of discovering that my daughter is not of my blood, leading me to seek the dissolution of my union. Alas, my mother and sister have chosen to stand with my unfaithful spouse. Thus, I shall plunge into the depths of my turmoil. My existence feels as though it has been turned upon its head in the most lamentable fashion, leaving me at a loss for where to commence. At the age of 33, I have been bound in matrimony to my wife, who is 30, for the span of 7 years. We have, or rather I believed we had, a daughter of 3 years, and I say believed, for it appears there lies much I was blissfully unaware of. The tempest began on what seemed an ordinary day. Upon a day bright and fair, I took a young maiden, a little girl, for merriment, just the two of us, as the hours flowed with ease, as if the very fabric of life conspired to grant us joy. We returned, and I found repose upon the couch, already pondering the delights of the morrow. Then my beloved entered, taking her seat beside me, close yet with an air of strangeness. I sensed a weight upon her heart, perhaps a matter of import or a need for discourse. Thus I inquired, "What troubles thee?" The expression upon her visage was difficult to capture, not sorrowful, yet burdened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. With a sudden breath, she proclaimed, "There is a matter of great significance I must share with thee. Lo, my stomach doth tighten with the thought that some misfortune hath befallen her kin. Is it sickness that plagues her, or hath some calamity occurred to her parents? What dost thou inquire about?" She goes quiet for a second, and I'm waiting half expecting something horrible, but what she finally says hits me like a punch. I wasn't braced, for she tells me that our daughter, our little girl who I've loved and raised since the moment she was born, isn't mine. Just straight up drops it like that. I don't think I even understood what she was saying at first, because my mind was already trying to figure out how to respond, but nothing was connecting it. Felt like my brain was frozen, but she keeps going, and it gets worse. She tells me she'd had this fling with some guy from a gym, right before finding out she was pregnant, and apparently he bailed as soon as he knew there was a kid involved. She's saying it with tears streaming down her face now, and she's apologizing like crazy, saying she never meant to hurt me, that she made a mistake, and she didn't know what else to do. I just sit there staring at her. But I don't really see her anymore. I'm staring at this person, this woman I thought I knew better than anyone, and it feels like she's a stranger. Lo, I find my hands devoid of sensation, naught but a constriction within my breast. It seems as though the very foundation of my existence hath been wrenched from beneath mine feet, and a torrent of memories doth assail my mind. The first embrace of a tender child, those restless nights spent soothing her cries, the joy of teaching her to utter "Daddy," each moment once a treasure now feels perverted. They have been snatched away, leaving behind but a hollow echo, a reminder that all was but an illusion. I was but a mere stand-in for a man who fled when the weight of reality bore down. My beloved sits beside me, her hand upon my arm, tears cascading as she utters apologies, yet her words are but a distant murmur. I find myself adrift, as if I inhabit a realm apart from her very presence. All I sense is treachery. Verily, it is not solely the act of infidelity that weighs upon my heart. Verily, it is the truth that she concealed this from my sight for 3 long years, each and every day. In the shadows of deception, I found myself entwined with a youth not of my blood, placing faith in a partner whose lips were sealed with falsehoods. Yet, in time, I summoned the strength to rise from the depths of betrayal. My limbs tremble with uncertainty, yet I declare my need for fresh air, for I cannot abide her presence in this moment. She implores me to remain, to mend our rift, but her words fall upon deaf ears. I am but a fragile shell, barely holding my composure. With a swift motion, I seize my coat and depart, leaving her amidst her desperate entreaties and tears. My mind is consumed by a singular thought: to escape her, to flee from it all. Outside, the world appears shrouded in a haze. My existence, my abode, my kin, all seem to disintegrate before my eyes, and I stand helpless, a mere spectator to the unraveling. No strategy guides me, only an overpowering instinct to run, to distance myself from the chaos. At last, I find myself within the carriage and set forth upon the road, yet the destination remains shrouded in uncertainty. All that I possess in my heart is the certainty that I cannot return to that place. Not at this moment, perchance not at any time henceforth. In this strange void, a persistent ache resides within my breast, unyielding in its torment. I had long believed that by fulfilling my duties as a devoted husband and a caring father, such afflictions would spare me their cruel embrace. Yet here I stand, and the course of events unfolds, beyond my power to alter. So be it. Upon the revelation that struck me like a thunderbolt, I sought refuge in a humble inn for the night. Verily, slumber eluded me, for my thoughts were a tempest, swirling with the weight of my wife's confessions. A sense of absurdity enveloped me, as I grappled with the notion that I had devoted 3 years to nurturing a child, believing her to be my own, only to discover the truth that shattered my world. There I sat, solitary in a drab chamber, reflecting upon the cherished moments that now felt as though they had been cruelly snatched away, as dawn approached. At last, I did restore my device to life, akin to unsealing a deluge. A multitude of missives and unanswered calls from my beloved spouse surged forth, each message cascading in swift succession, beseeching me to return home. We shall navigate this challenge together. Pray, forgive me. Thou art a sire, regardless of the discourse that doth unfold. I confess, I did not peruse them all, for I had no desire to linger, merely scrolling through did cause my heart to constrict. Thus, I ceased my reading midway and did block her, for I craved respite, and her utterances did but stoke the flames of the turmoil in which I found myself, following a hasty repast. I did summon a legal counsel, imparting unto him the essential details whilst omitting the sentiments, inquiring about the commencement of a dissolution of union. The gentleman exhibited understanding, which I found commendable, and guided me through the preliminary proceedings. In the throes of turmoil, I discerned the tangled web of my existence, particularly with the young one entwined in this tragic tale. The thought of remaining in that union, after the grievous act she committed, was beyond my comprehension. Thus, I reached out to my superior, beseeching a respite from my labors, for the weight of this affair rendered me incapable of performing my duties. To my surprise, he granted me a month's reprieve, no inquiries made, a rare glimmer of fortune amidst the shadows of my recent hours. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I yearned for a fleeting moment of solitude, a chance to gather my thoughts and contemplate my next course of action. Yet, alas, that tranquillity was but a fleeting whisper, for my mother and sister soon interjected into the fray. My sister was the first to call, and I answered with the hope of solace, for she had long been my steadfast ally. Yet, instead of the comfort I sought, her words bore the weight of betrayal, as she revealed her discourse with my wife, recounting the events that had transpired. Thou must ponder upon thy daughter and all that lies before thee. My blood didst begin to seethe for her sake. In a state of bewilderment, I found myself questioning the very nature of our kinship, whilst my sister hastily aligned herself with one party. She incessantly lamented my wife's contrition, urging reconciliation for the sake of familial harmony. Initially, I was rendered speechless, simmering with unspoken ire, striving to contain my tempestuous emotions. When at last I mustered the courage to voice my thoughts, I inquired, "Dost thou comprehend the gravity of her actions? Forsooth, she did deceive me for many a year. How might I cast aside such a wound?" Yet, my sister, relentless in her discourse, did persist, proclaiming her knowledge of my sorrow. She urged me to gaze upon the grander tapestry of life, as she would have it. Upon my shoulders lay a duty towards this young soul, irrespective of the circumstances that brought her to my door. I declared my disinterest in a sermon and severed the connection. Yet, shortly thereafter, my mother's voice rang through, echoing the very discourse I had just dismissed. Her fervor surpassed even that of the prior exchange. She spoke of how we have all grown fond of her, declaring her a member of our kin. Yet, she seemed indifferent to the treachery that had unfolded. It appeared she deemed my desire for separation as mere theatrics. I endeavored to convey the turmoil of discovering my spouse's deceit from the very start, yet my words fell upon deaf ears. My mother proclaimed that thou art a father in every sense that truly counts. The essence of biology doth not alter this truth. She even accused me of selfishness, claiming I failed to consider my daughter. My daughter! As if naught had shifted, as if the fact that she is not of my blood were but a trifling matter to be dismissed. My mother began to wield guilt with great weight, declaring that should I pursue the path of divorce, she would cast me aside. That struck deep, and verily, it ignited a fire of indignation within me. I sat there in silence, just taking it all in, feeling like I was the only sane one in the middle of this messed up situation. My own mom was choosing my wife's side, throwing years of loyalty out the window, as if my pain was an afterthought. It was like no one cared that I'd been lied to for years, that my entire reality had been a sham. They were all too focused on this idea of family, and a kid who turns out isn't even biologically mine. The whole thing was tearing me up inside, so I ended the call with my mom and decided I needed to get out of there. I called up my best friend and asked if I could crash at his place for a while. He didn't even hesitate, just told me to come over. That was the first real bit of support I'd felt since this whole thing blew up, and honestly, it was a relief. I packed a few things, got in the car, and drove over to his place. Once I got to my friend's house, I could finally let my guard down. I didn't have to pretend everything was fine, didn't have to keep hearing people telling me to work it out or think of my daughter. My friend and his wife just listened. They didn't push me to forgive or act like this was no big deal. For the first time in days, I felt like someone actually understood what I was going through. A couple of days later, things got even messy, and my mom sent me this long text basically saying that if I went through with a divorce, she'd never forgive me. She went on about how I'd be abandoning my daughter and how it would break the family. My sister chimed in with similar stuff, saying I was acting heartless and not thinking about the impact on the kid. It was like they'd all forgotten who was betrayed here. I couldn't believe how quickly they'd all rallied around my wife, treating me like the villain for even considering a divorce. I've been the one lied to, the one who had to live with the shock of finding out my life was a lie, and yet they were making me feel like the bad guy. In a moment of fervor, I did respond to my mother's missive, asserting my rightful claim to depart and decrying her attempts to invoke guilt upon me as most unjust. I did declare unto her that I was not forsaking any soul. My spouse had, in truth, forsaken our union on that fateful day. She chose to betray my trust and then weave a tapestry of deceit for years. Her subsequent response was curt and frigid, merely stating, "Do what you will, but do not come weeping to us when you grasp the folly of your choice." It stung, yet a peculiar sense of relief washed over me. If this was the cost of asserting my own worth, so be it. After silencing my mother and sister, I had hoped for a lull, a moment to gather my thoughts. Instead, it seemed they intensified their efforts, as if I were the one in need of mending, and they would not relent. Days passed, and upon my wife receiving the divorce papers, a fresh tempest of turmoil erupted. The deluge of messages and calls resumed, not solely from her but from my mother and sister as well. My device buzzed incessantly with admonitions against hasty choices and reminders of familial loyalty. It was relentless. Then my mother did dispatch a lengthy missive, detailing all matters therein. She believed I was in error, proclaiming that I ought to embrace my role as a good husband and father, regardless of the child's lineage. She insisted that this was my opportunity to demonstrate true fortitude, asserting that kinship transcends mere blood ties. Her words echoed the sentiment that while any man may choose to depart, a true gentleman remains steadfast and mends what is fractured. Verily, I was taken aback by mine own mother, whom I had ever believed to be my steadfast ally, now deeming me a coward for seeking to withdraw. She expounded upon the notion that I was all my daughter possessed, and that it was mine duty to prioritize her above all else. She proclaimed, "Thou hast already nurtured her for 3 years, she knows thee as her father. Pray, do not cast that aside." Verily, I comprehend her stance. She speaks truth in declaring that my daughter perceives me as her father. Yet, this doth not alter the reality that my wife hath deceived me each day for the span of 3 years. 'Tis not a matter I can simply cast aside, especially when my response was not swift. My sister hath chosen to partake in this matter as well. She did leave me a message, and the timbre of her voice was nigh unto beseeching. She spoke of how I would rue this day in times to come, and how I would bring sorrow upon an innocent soul by turning my back. She even uttered words akin to, "I know thou art in pain, yet do not err." The manner in which she spoke was indelible. It seemed as though she perceived my actions as rash, as if I had not been enduring this torment day and night since the revelation struck me. It left me feeling as though none within my own kin truly grasped the depth of my suffering. At that juncture, I was but a shadow of myself, striving to navigate each day without succumbing to despair. My friend's abode offered solace, yet there existed a limit to the comfort he and his wife could provide to prevent my descent into chaos. I occupied my hours evading my device, endeavoring to suppress thoughts of the calamity my existence had morphed into. My spouse had not merely betrayed my trust, she had usurped my very foundation of security, and now my own family rallied to her side, urging me to pardon and overlook as if it were a trifling error. One eve, when the tumult had quieted for a spell. In a moment of vulnerability, I perused my messages, discovering a lengthy missive from my wife. She seemed to pour forth her emotions, or at least feign such sincerity, expressing her remorse for all that had transpired. She claimed she would do anything to atone, and that the thought of losing me haunted her. With audacity, she confessed her fear of revealing her truth sooner, fearing the pain it might cause me. The irony was palpable, for now, the anguish enveloped me, a weight too heavy to dismiss. She reiterated her desire for us to remain a family, asserting that I was the sole father our daughter had ever known, and that happiness could be reclaimed. Her words suggested a trivial disagreement had occurred, rather than the years of deception that had unfolded. She even penned that we could overcome this if we remained united. Really? After all that had transpired, she believed I could simply cast aside the past and continue as if nothing had occurred. Upon finishing her message, a wave of nausea washed over me. In silence I remained, for no words could truly convey the tempest within my heart. It seemed she anticipated a figure of unwavering grace, one who could absorb the weight of her actions with ease. Yet I was but a mere mortal, caught unawares and consumed by a fury that knew no bounds. The following day, my mother reached out once more, and I resolved to maintain my composure. Yet, as she began her familiar refrain about the grander scheme of things, my restraint shattered. I laid bare the depths of my betrayal, expressing how each passing day since the revelation felt as though I were an unwitting actor in a tale not my own. I implored her to grasp my perspective, if only for a fleeting moment, dear mother. Alas, I find myself the wronged party in this tale of betrayal. Lo, I am the one who hath been deceived each day for countless years. Canst thou not endeavor to perceive it from my vantage? Yet she persisted, uttering phrases such as life is not merely a tapestry of stark contrasts, and that all mortals are prone to err. It seemed as though she possessed a retort for each utterance of mine, a counter to every sorrow I endeavored to articulate. Then, with a flourish, she imparted this wisdom: "Thou art prepared to cast aside thy union and a cherished kin for but a singular misstep." In that moment, I could bear it no longer. I declared to her that it was not merely a singular error, but rather a tapestry woven with deceit, each thread laid upon the last. Wearied was I of the charade, of all those feigning indifference to the gravity of the matter. I expressed my discontent, revealing that it seemed my kin valued the facade of harmony more than the turmoil I endured. I could perceive her exasperated breath from afar, as though I were a petulant child, obstinately resisting wisdom. At last, she conceded, uttering her reluctant acceptance of my choices, yet warning that should I persist in my isolation, their support would wane. It struck me like a harsh rebuke, as if my own progenitor had drawn a definitive boundary. Thus, I severed the connection, departing without the customary farewell, leaving silence in my wake. A curious sense of relief washed over me, yet a profound emptiness lingered in its wake. It became evident that to my mother and sister, the notion of family was bound to the preservation of appearances, even if it required the dismissal of my anguish and the masquerade of normalcy. They comprehended not, and perchance they ne'er shall, as I sat in solitude, the weight of all things bore down upon me, my spouse's treachery laid bare. My kin, aligning with her, pressed upon me the burden to remain, yet none of it would dissipate. This would be a protracted and bitter struggle, and I found myself alone in the fray. Yet, I would choose solitude over the continued embrace of falsehood. An update, the first of its kind. Verily, after a fortnight of evading her presence, of deftly sidestepping my mother's poignant remonstrances and disregarding my sister's persistent missives, I resolved to confront my beloved in the flesh. The torment of uncertainty gnawed at my very soul, for I sought to comprehend the motives behind her actions, to fathom how she could weave falsehoods before mine eyes for so many a year. Questions swirled within me, and though the answers I yearned for might elude my grasp, I knew I could not proceed on my path until I endeavored to seek them. Thus, I sent a missive, bidding her to convene with me at a nearby tavern of refreshment. I found myself unprepared to return to my abode, burdened as I was by a multitude of memories. The thought of her presence at my friend's dwelling was unwelcome. This café, however, offered a semblance of neutrality, a refuge from the past. Upon my arrival, I took my place at a secluded table, ensuring a semblance of privacy whilst remaining within the realm of the public eye. My companion and his spouse accompanied me, maintaining a respectful distance, prepared for any tempest that might arise. Then she entered, her visage weary, as though sleep had eluded her for many a night. Yet, truth be told, her state stirred not a flicker of concern within me. Her gaze swept the room until it alighted upon me, and in that fleeting moment a glimmer of hope danced in her eyes, as if she believed this encounter heralded some form of reconciliation, or that I would declare my return to her side. Such a notion vexed me instantly. Does she truly presume I would return, humbled and repentant, merely because her tears have flowed in remorse? Absurdity, indeed. She took her seat opposite me, bestowing a wistful smile that seemed to linger in the air, yet before she could utter any words of contrition, I interrupted her flow. What prompted thee to undertake such an act? With a directness that brooked no delay, I sought not the lamentations of the heart but the unvarnished truth, however harsh it might be. She inhaled deeply, her gaze falling to her hands, where her wedding ring became the focus of her restless fingers. After an eternity of silence, she at last began to speak. It was an error most grievous. Her voice, but a mere whisper, spoke of his allure, whilst I found myself ensnared in a web of uncertainty. In a moment of frailty, I found myself nearly amused by the nonchalance with which she recounted her stumble, as if she had merely encountered a fissure in the pavement. Thus, for the sake of his allure, you deemed it fitting to cast aside all that you held dear. Alas, I found it most difficult to fathom the words that reached mine ears. She made no effort to cloak her intentions in deeper reasoning, merely driven by raw allure. As she gazed upward, I perceived her attempt to decipher my thoughts, perhaps in search of a glimmer of compassion. I was filled with trepidation, indeed, she replied, her tone tinged with a hint of defensiveness. By no design of mine did these events unfold. It came to pass that I found myself shaking my head in utter dismay. Thou didst not intend to deceive, yet deceive thou didst. And though thou didst not scheme to weave falsehoods into our days for 3 long years, alas, that too was thy doing. When didst thou intend to reveal this matter unto me, or didst thou mean to shroud it in secrecy for all eternity? She faltered, evidently ill-equipped to confront such an inquiry. Verily, I find myself in a state of uncertainty. In contemplation, I found myself ensnared by a notion most peculiar. I believed that silence would usher us forth into a realm of contentment. Yet, in that very moment, the tempest within me clamored for release, urging me to raise my voice amidst the bustling café. She, in her folly, presumed she could weave a tapestry of deceit without consequence, as if such artifice could conjure joy. It was an act steeped in egotism, and I felt as though I were conversing with one utterly oblivious to the havoc wrought by her choices, as if she dwelt in a world where her deeds bore no weight. "Thus, it is settled," I inquired, reclining in my seat. "Thou didst believe that concealing this truth from me was for the greater good, that thou wouldst continue to feign a joyful kinship whilst I nurtured a child not of my blood." Her eyes brimmed with sorrow as she extended her hand across the table, yet I recoiled, halting her advance. "Nay," I declared, a tempest of ire and melancholy swirling within me, emotions too complex to articulate. "Do not endeavor to shift this discourse to thine own sentiments. Thou hast had 3 years to ponder this matter. 3 long years, and now I am to simply cast it aside." She wept with greater fervor, yet I felt no remorse. Not any longer. In the throes of betrayal, I found myself the unwitting victim of deceit, left to bear the weight of humiliation. She could weep to her heart's content, yet my well of sympathy had run dry. I allowed her a moment of silence, hoping for words that might possess some semblance of reason, a response that might echo the truth. Yet she remained mute, her tears falling as she gazed down at her hands, much like a chastened youth. After a spell of this quietude, I resolved that I had endured enough. I did not arrive at this place to witness her unraveling. My purpose was to seek understanding. If she could not provide that, then prolonging this was futile. Behold, I spoke with a tone devoid of emotion. Enough is enough. My heart is weary of this burden, and I shall not be swayed by guilt to rear a child not of my own blood. I stood prepared to embrace fatherhood, yet you snatched that choice from me the moment deceit took root. She gazed upon me, her countenance fraught with dread. "Please," she implored, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf in the wind. "She is thy daughter. She doth believe thee to be her sire. She is but a soul unacquainted with the world's cruel ways. Turn not thy back upon her for the folly I have wrought. Her affections for thee are assured, that matter is settled. To speak truly, my affection for that child remains, and in certain respects it endures still. Yet, whenever her visage crosses my mind, I find it impossible to disentangle her from the treachery wrought by my spouse. Each tender utterance of "I love you, Daddy," was founded upon a falsehood. As painful as this revelation is, I recognized that to remain would be to act from a sense of duty rather than genuine love, and such a state would be unjust to us both. With a heart heavy yet resolute, I declared my unwavering affection for her, striving to maintain a calm demeanor. Yet, the burden of this existence weighs too heavily upon my soul. Thou hast rendered such a life untenable, and now the consequences shall be thine to bear, not mine. In that moment she succumbed to despair, weeping unabashedly amidst the bustling café, drawing the gaze of onlookers, though their scrutiny held no sway over me. This turmoil was of her own making, and it was high time she confronted it in solitude. Rising from my seat, I seized my coat and departed without uttering another syllable. I departed, leaving her amidst her remorse and her weeping. The strangest occurrence was as I took my leave. A sense of buoyancy enveloped me. Though I was not mended nor whole, I found myself weary of bearing her deceptions. After the gathering, I returned to the abode of a dear companion, where I have sought refuge amidst this turmoil. He inquired about the proceedings, yet I found no desire to share my thoughts. All I imparted unto him was that our tale had reached its conclusion. He comprehended, and did not press me for further particulars. Verily, I did commend thee, good sir, for thy courage, and thus we parted ways. In the days that ensued, I devoted myself to the humble tasks of existence, such as rising from slumber, partaking of sustenance, and engaging in diversions to occupy my mind. Grand gestures of moving on or healing did not capture my interest. They seemed but a facade, and I found myself unprepared for such pretenses. In my heart, I yearned for the return of normalcy, even in the most modest of forms. The wheels of divorce were already in motion, and I found myself in the company of my attorney on several occasions, seeking to bring closure to this chapter. Truly, those encounters seemed but a haze, a dreamlike state, as I sat in that austere office, deliberating upon the fragments of a life once shared. Text, though I endeavored to hold close the remnants of what once was, each utterance of custody or financial burdens served as a cruel reminder of the kinship I believed I possessed, yet was but an illusion. My former spouse, in her relentless pursuit, sought to bridge the chasm with letters and voicemails, the customary overtures of remorse. I perused a missive of hers, only to find the same refrain: apologies, entreaties for absolution, and promises of a transformed existence. She even ventured to invoke the sentiment of our daughter's longing, as if such words could erase the torment she had wrought upon my spirit. I chose silence in response, severing all ties, instructing my counsel to manage any further discourse, and thus I resolved to move forward unencumbered. Yet, my kin were of a different tale. My mother and sister, alas, did not embrace my choice with open hearts. To put it mildly, they struggled to comprehend my unwillingness to simply pardon and overlook, to don the mask of a joyous family each time our words intertwined. It was but a familiar refrain, a dance oft repeated. Thou art prone to overreaction, ponder upon thy daughter. Text, thy beloved spouse hath erred, yet she doth express her remorse. The burden was wearisome, and it pained me deeply to sense the absence of their support. Thus, I found myself at a crossroads, compelled to make a decision regarding this matter. I ceased to respond to my mother's entreaties, turned away from the ceaseless messages, and silenced the discourse of our shared gathering. I felt no need to bear the additional weight if they could not stand resolutely by my side in this trial. I perceived no reason to keep them apprised of my plight for the present. In truth, silence appeared the wisest course. Yet, even with the familial pressures lifted, an ache lingered within me, one I could not dispel. The relinquishment of the dream of fatherhood proved more arduous than I had anticipated. I had grown accustomed to the joyous sounds of my daughter's laughter, her warm embraces, and the cherished tales at twilight. And though I understood that existence oft rests upon falsehoods, the heart remains heavy. Each time I beheld a family gathered in joyous union, a profound emptiness enveloped my heart, as though a fragment of my very essence had been severed. Yet, I consoled myself with the notion that this sorrow was but a fleeting shadow, a trial to endure. One fateful eve, whilst I strolled to clear the tumult within, I found myself drawn to a park that once echoed with laughter shared with my beloved child. The very sight of it struck me with a force I could scarcely bear. I lingered, an observer of the tender moments between parents and their offspring, acutely aware of my own exclusion from a realm I once claimed as my own. This poignant realization compelled me to retreat, for I was not yet prepared to confront such heartache. In the passage of time, perhaps I would find the strength to face it anew. I commenced the noble quest of rediscovering fragments of my essence once more. I went back to work, throwing myself into projects to keep my mind occupied. My coworkers knew something was up, but no one pried too much, which I appreciated. My boss was supportive, checking in every so often without pushing me to open up. He just said, "Take it at your own pace, man." And I took that to heart. A few months later, I decided to move out of the city. Too many memories here, too many places that reminded me of what could have been. I found a place in a new town, somewhere smaller, quieter. Moving was hard, packing up my stuff, going through things that were tied to my old life. I ended up donating or throwing out a lot of stuff that reminded me of her stuff I didn't want following me around in this new chapter. The first night in my new place was strange. It was empty, sure, but it also felt like a fresh start. I didn't have all the answers, yet didn't feel like I'd fully healed or anything dramatic like that, but sitting there in a space that was all mine without memories of betrayal, lingering in every corner, felt good. There was no need to cast a wary glance behind, nor to ponder the deceit that might lurk in the shadows. It was merely I, and in that solitude I found sufficiency for the present. As the sands of time slipped through the hourglass, I began to rekindle bonds with others in a manner most profound. In years long past, I had not engaged in such pursuits, yet I found myself reunited with cherished companions, joining a band of wanderers upon the trails, and rekindling passions once forsaken. Gradually, I commenced the noble endeavor of crafting a life anew. That was solely my own, unshackled by the weight of shattered vows or familial strife. Each dawn seemed to restore a piece of my spirit. A fragment I had not known was absent. As for my kin, I maintained my distance, yet the burden lightened. They would extend their hands from time to time, yet I felt no compulsion to grasp them in return. I had endured much and lacked the vigor to continually defend my choices before them. Should they fail to honor my resolve, the fault lay not with me, but with their own hearts. As I gazed back upon the past, how curious it is to ponder the swift transformations of my existence. I constructed my world upon the foundation of kinship, only to witness it crumble before mine eyes. Yet here I stand, though marked by the trials endured, still resolute. The fragments of my former life remain scattered, yet I persist, striving to restore what was lost. Yet, for the very first occasion, I found myself advancing upon my own accord, and that was a treasure no soul could ever seize from me.